Tim, let me come to you first. So with that Bloomberg Businessweek interview, if it was you interviewing Trump, what would you have said to him?
Well, Trump is not alone in making these mistakes or misunderstanding the relationship between Taiwan and the US, especially in the semiconductor era. But if I had 2 minutes, I would share with him a quick history lesson of the US-Taiwan relationship. It even starts as far back as 1950. His predecessor, Harry S. Truman, was really not a fan of the Kuomintang and the nationalists at the time, but he changed his mind. He had an about face and kicked off 15 years of incredible amount of investment from the United States government into Taiwan and the nationalist government that really helped build the industry. Then I'd take Mr. Trump forward to 1970s when the Taiwanese government, ITRI, actually licensed, they spent money and gave it to the Radio Corp of America, RCA, and sent engineers to the US to learn the chip industry. They didn't steal anything, they licensed it. And the Americans got money to license this technology and teach the Taiwanese how to make chips. I'd skip forward another 10 years to the mid-80s when an American citizen, Morris Chang, came to Taiwan and brought with him the knowledge and helped build a semiconductor industry here. And over the next 20 years, enabled what is a very robust, very profitable chip industry in the United States.
And so would you say that, the part of the supply chain that Taiwan occupies, which is contract manufacturing, was the US actually interested in this part of it?
They were in that business through an integrated model. Right now, there's very few companies in the US left that do both the design and the manufacturing. Intel is the most famous, and it's struggling right now. There are other companies like Texas Instruments, which Morris Chang worked for back in the 70s and 80s. But right now, it is very much a divided industry. Taiwan brings a lot to the table. TSMC, of course, is the most famous. There are other companies like UMC that also do contract manufacturing. It's been able to allow the sides to focus on what they're very, very good at and allow the stuff that they're not as good at or their weaknesses to be palmed off to somebody else. So Taiwan does its part that's very, very good at. The US does the part that they're very, very good at. And other allies, Korea and Japan and even the EU, are also doing their parts of the semiconductor ecosystem that they are specialized in. Everybody is benefiting from this.
Alex, so we saw there, and Tim mentioned, the EU, South Korea, Japan, also around about the same share as Taiwan. Is it a common misperception that Taiwan controls the semiconductor ecosystem?
I think the fact, or people get the impression that Taiwan controls, quote unquote, of the industry is because of two things. Number one, the more high-end chips were produced in Taiwan, and Taiwan's share of that production is pretty high compared to other countries. The other is that whether the United States in general wanted to have both design and manufacturing in terms of national security or nationalism or economic nationalism, that given the United States more kind of feeling that they can do by their own without or lessen the the rely on the overseas markets or overseas manufacturing to enhance the American sense of security.
So you're talking about bringing it back to localization of the supply chain. Tim, so what do you think is the link between chips and defense? You took our chip industry, therefore we don't need to defend you, seems to be the message.
I think that he's kind of jamming together two separate issues. There isn't actually a link. I think that this myth of the Silicon Shield has been pervasive for more than 20 years, and I think it is a myth. I think that, for example, if China was to invade Taiwan and get full access to TSMC's fabs, they wouldn't know what to do with them. It is not just about having access to fabs and equipment. You've got to know how to use them. And the other thing is, if all those fabs suddenly upped and left to the United States, which is unfeasible, then the US still wouldn't have supply chain security. Because the minute a chip is made at a factory, it has to go off and get packaged. It has to be carved up into smaller chips and put onto a PCB and put into an electronics device. And all of that happens in Asia. So it's just one part of the puzzle.
Alex, let's turn to Taiwan politics. Ma Wen-jun, chair of the Legislative Defense Committee, also representing the KMT, says the US is colonizing Taiwan, pushing it to spend more on arms that aren't delivered. What does Ma mean by those comments?
I think she was trying to explain, and to my understanding, colony or colonize Taiwan is not the true meaning that she wanted to express.
What did she
I
want
think
to
she was referring to whether the United States is treating Taiwan as a proxy or playing a Taiwan card against China. Arms sales backlog is an issue for sure. It's $19.1 billion US dollars in February 2024, and right now some people said it's 19.8 billion now. So Taiwan continued to pay for the system that we purchased from the United States, but not delivered yet. I think lawmakers can sometimes use a stronger term or language to express their view, and in a way to exert some kind of pressure to the United States government. So I would not, try to defend her, but it is an issue that Taiwan concerns a lot.
But I'm curious how calling Taiwan a U.S. proxy is putting pressure on the U.S. to deliver arms.
Well, as I said, that may be two different things. One is the arms delivery. That's one thing. It's very straight with the numbers that if you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. But whether the United States is playing a Taiwan card or seeing Taiwan as a proxy to poke the Chinese eyes and to signaling the American views on China, that's another thing.
Tim, you've written that viewing, and I quote, viewing the U.S.-Taiwan relationship as contentious instead of cooperative, so this obviously is Trump's view, or how he portrays it, or portrayed it in the interviews, risks opening up a fissure for China to exploit. Can you explain how China will benefit?
Well, the very fact that Donald Trump, former president, prospective future president, is even raising that issue is already a win for China. Anytime a policymaker in the United States or Taiwan second guesses or have doubts about the U.S.-Taiwan relationship, that is a win for Beijing. Anytime the two sides have a debate about arms sales or semiconductor investment in the United States or any kind of deal between the two sides that would bring them together, anytime that pauses or there's any debate or any discussion, that is a win for Beijing. Because what Beijing does not want is Taipei and Washington to be closer and closer and closer. Doesn't want the Taiwanese people and the American people to be closer and closer and closer, because that is definitely bad for China and its own expansionist plans for the region.